Welcome back. I am Pemberton, and this is part 27 of Herodotus' Histories. Aristagoras has come to Athens, but before Herodotus lets him speak, he sits us down for the story of how Athens became the kind of city that would listen. He tells of Harmodius and Aristogeiton, the two lovers who hid their daggers in myrtle boughs and struck down the tyrant's brother at the great festival, of how the rest of the house of Peisistratids was at last driven from the Acropolis, with the oracle at Delphi quietly pushing Sparta to do it, and of how Cleisthenes then remade the Athenian people into 10 new tribes and gave them, in all but name, their democracy. Let us go on.
After Aristagoras had been driven out of Sparta, he went on to Athens, which had been freed from the rule of despots in the way I shall tell. Hipparchus, son of Peisistratids and brother of the despot Hippias, had seen a vision that plainly foretold his fate, and afterward he was killed by Aristogeiton and Harmodius, who were originally Gephyraians by descent. Even after this, the Athenians continued for 4 years to be governed despotically no less than before. Indeed, they were governed even more harshly. The vision that Hipparchus had was this. On the night before the Panathenaea, it seemed to Hipparchus that a tall and handsome man came and stood beside him, and spoke these riddling verses to him. With a steadfast soul, like a lion, endure unendurable evil. No man who does wrong shall escape the appointed judgment. As soon as day came, Hipparchus publicly reported these verses to the interpreters of dreams. But afterward he put the vision out of his mind, and began to take part in the procession, during which he lost his life. The Gephyraians, to whom the murderers of Hipparchus belonged, say in their own account that they originally came from Eretria. But as I find by tracing the inquiry back, they were Phoenicians, from those who came with Cadmos to the land now called Boeotia. They lived in the district of Tanagra, which had been allotted to them in that land. After the Cadmans had first been driven out by the Argives, these Gephyraians were next driven out by the Boeotians, and then turned toward Athens. The Athenians received them as citizens of their state on certain fixed conditions, laying down rules that excluded them from a number of things not worth mentioning here. These Phoenicians who came with Cadmos, among whom were the Gephyraians, brought many arts among the Hellenes when they settled in this land of Boeotia, and especially letters, which, as it seems to me, did not exist among the Hellenes before that time. At first they brought in the letters generally used by the Phoenician race, but afterward, as time went on, they changed the form of the letters along with their speech. During this period the Ionians were the Hellenes who lived near them in most of the places where they were settled. The Ionians learned letters from the Phoenicians, altered their forms slightly, and used them, and in doing so they called them Phoenicians, as was only right, since the Phoenicians had introduced them into Hellas. Also, from ancient times the Ionians have called paper skins, because formerly, when paper was scarce, they used the skins of goats and sheep. Even in my own time, many of the barbarians still write on such skins. I myself once saw Cadmean characters in the temple of Ismenian Apollo at Thebes of the Boeotians, engraved on certain tripods, and in most respects resembling Ionic letters. One of these tripods has an inscription saying that Amphitryon dedicated it after returning from the Teleboian land. This inscription would belong to the time of Laos, son of Labdacos, son of Polydoros, son of Cadmos. Another tripod says in hexameter rhythm that Sceos dedicated it to far-shooting Apollo after winning a boxing contest as a most beautiful gift in the god's honor. This Sceos would be the son of Hippocoon, at least if it was truly he who offered it, and not another man with the same name as the son of Hippocoon, and he would have lived at the same time as Oedipus, son of Laos. The third tripod, also in hexameter rhythm, says that Laodamas, as king, dedicated it from his wealth to fair-aiming Apollo as a most beautiful gift in the god's honor. It was in the reign of this very Laodamas, son of Eteocles, that the Cadmeans were driven out by the Argives and turned toward the Enchelians. The Gephyraians, being then left behind, were later forced by the Boeotians to withdraw to Athens. They have temples established in Athens in which the other Athenians have no share, and among other temples that differ from the rest, there is especially a temple of Demeter Achaea and a celebration of her mysteries. I have now told of the vision seen by Hipparchus, and also where the Gephyraians came from, the race to which the murderers of Hipparchus belonged. In addition to this, I must return to the story I first meant to tell, how the Athenians were freed from despots. Hippias was despot, and was treating the Athenians harshly because of the death of Hipparchus. The Alcmaeonidae, who were Athenians by race and fugitives from the sons of Peisistratos, had tried, together with the other Athenian exiles, to return by force, but they did not succeed. Instead they met with great disaster when they attempted to return and free Athens, after fortifying Leipzidrion above Paeonia. After this, still devising every means against the sons of Peisistratos, the Alcmaeonidae accepted the contract to build and complete the temple at Delphi, the one that exists now but did not yet exist then. Since they were wealthy and had been men of reputation from ancient times, they completed the temple more beautifully than the plan required, especially in this respect. Although they had agreed to make the temple of common limestone, they built its front parts in Parian marble. As the Athenians say, these men, while settled at Delphi, persuaded the Pythian prophetess by gifts of money that whenever Spartans came to consult the oracle, whether privately or publicly sent, she should urge them to set Athens free. Since the same utterance was delivered to them on every occasion, the Lacedaemonians sent Anchimolios son of Astor, a man of repute among their citizens, with an army to drive the sons of Peisistratids out of Athens, although these men were very closely connected with them by guest friendship. They judged that the concerns of the god should be preferred to those of men. They sent this force by sea in ships. Anchimolios put into shore at Phaleron and disembarked his army. But the sons of Peisistratids had learned of this beforehand and called in an auxiliary force from Thessaly, for they had made an alliance with the Thessalians. At their request the Thessalians sent, by public resolution, a body of 1,000 horsemen and also their king Cinyas, a man of Conian. Having obtained these allies, the sons of Peisistratids contrived the following plan. They cut down the trees in the plain of Phaleron and made the district suitable for horsemen to ride through. Then they sent the cavalry to attack the enemy's camp. Falling upon it, the cavalry killed many of the Lacedaemonians, including Anchimolios himself, and shut the survivors up in their ships. Such was the result of the first expedition from Lacedaemon. The burial place of Anchimolios is at Alopka in Attica, near the temple of Heracles at Kynosarges. After this the Lacedaemonians equipped a larger expedition and sent it out against Athens. They appointed their king Cleomenes son of Anaxandrides to command the army, and this time they sent it not by sea but by land. When they invaded the land of Attica, the Thessalian horse were the first to engage them in battle. In a short time they were routed, and more than 40 of them fell. The survivors at once departed and went straight back to Thessaly. Cleomenes then came to the city together with those Athenians who desired to be free, and began to besiege the despots who were shut up in the Pelasgian wall. The Lacedaemonians would never have captured the sons of Peisistratids at all, for they themselves had no intention of maintaining a long blockade, while the besieged were well supplied with food and drink. After besieging them for only a few days, the Lacedaemonians would have gone back to Sparta. But at this very time something happened that was unfortunate for the sons of Peisistratids and helpful to the Lacedaemonians. The children of the sons of Peisistratids were captured while being secretly sent out of the country. When this happened, all their plans were thrown into confusion, and they surrendered on the terms desired by the Athenians, receiving their children back and agreeing to depart from Attica within 5 days. Afterward they left the country and went to Sicyon on the Scamander, after their family had ruled the Athenians for 36 years. They too were originally Pylians and sons of Neleus, descended from the same ancestors as the family of Cadros and Melanthos, who had formerly become kings of Athens though they were settlers from abroad. For this reason also Hippocrates gave his son the name Peisistratos as a memorial, naming him after Peisistratos the son of Nestor. Thus the Athenians were freed from despots. Before I go further, I will first set out the things worth telling that they did or suffered after they were liberated, down to the time when Ionia revolted from Darius and Aristagoras the Milesian came to Athens to ask them for help. Athens had been great even before this, and after being freed from despots it gradually became greater still. In the city 2 men held power, Cleisthenes, a descendant of Alcmaeon, the same man who is said to have bribed the Pythian prophetess Aristagoras, son of Tisander, from a family of high reputation, though I cannot state his original descent. His kinsmen, however, offer sacrifices to the Carian Zeus. These men entered into party strife for power. When Cleisthenes was being worsted in the struggle, he made common cause with the people. After this he arranged the Athenians into 10 tribes, whereas before they had been in 4. He changed the names by which they had been called after the sons of Ion, namely Gelion, Aeschychorius, Argades, and Hopples, and invented for them names taken from other heroes, all native Athenians except Ajax, whom he added as a neighbor and ally, although he was not an Athenian. In these matters it seems to me that this Cleisthenes was imitating his mother's father, Cleisthenes the despot of Sicyon. When that Cleisthenes went to war with Argos, he first caused the contests of Rhapsodus at Sicyon to cease, because they were concerned with the poems of Homer, in which Argives and Argos are celebrated almost everywhere. Secondly, since there was, as there still is, in the very marketplace of the Sicyonians a hero temple of Adrastos son of Talaus, Cleisthenes wished to cast Adrastos out of the land because he was an Argive. So he went to Delphi and consulted the oracle about whether he should cast out Adrastos, and the Pythian prophetess answered that Adrastos was king of the Sicyonians, while Cleisthenes was a stone thrower at them. Since the god did not allow him to do this, he went home and considered means by which Adrastos might be made to depart of his own accord. When he thought he had discovered them, he sent to Thebes and Boeotia and said that he wished to introduce into his city Melanippos son of Astacus, and the Thebans gave him permission. Cleisthenes introduced Melanippos into his city, appointed for him a sacred enclosure within the precincts of the city hall itself, and established him there in the strongest position. Cleisthenes introduced Melanippos, for I must relate this also, because he was the greatest enemy of Adrastos, since he had killed both his brother Megistius and his son-in-law Tydeus. After appointing the sacred enclosure for him, Cleisthenes took away the sacrifices and festivals of Adrastos and gave them to Melanippos. The Sicyonians had been accustomed to honor Adrastos with very great honors, for this land had formerly belonged to Polybos, and Adrastos was the daughter's son of Polybos. When Polybos died without sons, he gave his kingdom to Adrastos. The Sicyonians gave Adrastos not only other honors, but also in connection with his sufferings, especially honored him with tragic choruses, giving this honor not to Dionysos but to Adrastos. Cleisthenes, however, gave the choruses back to Dionysos, and the other rights he gave to Melanippus. This is what he had done to Adrastos. He also changed the names of the Dorian tribes, so that the Sicyonians would not have the same tribes as the Argives. In this matter he showed great contempt for the Sicyonians, for the names he gave were taken from the words for a pig and an ass, with only the endings changed, except in the case of his own tribe, to which he gave a name from his own rule. These last were called Archelaoi, while one of the other tribes was called Hyatai, another Onetai, and the remaining tribe Quiritai. The men of Sicyon used these tribal names not only during the reign of Cleisthenes, but also for 60 years after his death. Then, however, they considered the matter, and changed the names to Hyles, Pamphiloi, and Daimonatai, adding a fourth tribe besides these, to which they gave the name Aegiales after Aegialius son of Adrastos. This, then, was what the Cleisthenes of Sicyon had done. The Athenian Cleisthenes, who was his daughter's son and was named after him, despised the Ionians, I suppose, just as the other Cleisthenes had despised the Dorians, and he imitated his namesake Cleisthenes so that the Athenians would not have the same tribes as the Ionians. At the time of which I am speaking, he added to his own party the whole body of the common people of the Athenians, whom he had formerly despised. He changed the names of the tribes, and made them more numerous than they had been. In fact, he made 10 rulers of tribes instead of 4, and he also distributed the demes among the tribes in groups of 10. After adding the common people to his party, he became much stronger than his opponents. Then Aristagoras, as he in turn was being worsted, devised a plan against him. He called in Cleomenes the Lacedaemonian to help him, for Cleomenes had been his guest, friend since the siege of the sons of Peisistratos. Moreover, Cleomenes was accused of being intimate with the wife of Aristagoras. First, Cleomenes sent a herald to Athens demanding the expulsion of Cleisthenes, and along with him, many other Athenians, calling them the men under the curse. He sent this message under the instruction of Aristagoras, for the Alcmaeonidae and their party were accused of the murder referred to by this phrase, while Aristagoras and his friends had no share in it. The Athenians who were called under the curse received that name in this way. There was among the Athenians a man named Chilon, who had won victory at the Olympic Games. This man acted arrogantly, wishing to make himself despot, and after forming an association of men of his own age, he tried to seize the Acropolis. When he was unable to take possession of it, he sat down as a suppliant before the image of the goddess. These men were taken from their place of supplication by the presidents of the Naucraries, who then administered affairs at Athens, on the condition that they should be liable to any penalty short of death. The Alcmaeonidae are accused of having put them to death. This had happened before the time of Peisistratos. When Cleomenes sent demanding the expulsion of Cleisthenes, and of those under the curse, Cleisthenes himself secretly withdrew. Nevertheless, after this Cleomenes appeared in Athens with no very large force. When he arrived, he proceeded to expel as accursed 700 Athenian families whose names Aristagoras had suggested to him. After doing this, he next tried to dissolve the Senate, and he put the offices of the state into the hands of 300 men who were partisans of Aristagoras. But the Senate resisted, and was not willing to submit. So Cleomenes, with Aristagoras and his partisans, seized the Acropolis. Then the rest of the Athenians united by common agreement, and besieged them for 2 days. On the 3rd day, all those among them who were Lacedaemonians departed from the country under a truce. In this way the ominous saying spoken to Cleomenes was fulfilled. When he had gone up to the Acropolis intending to take possession of it, he was going toward the sanctuary of the goddess as if to address her in prayer. But before he had passed through the door, the priestess rose from her seat and spoke to him. Lacedaemonian stranger, go back and do not enter the temple, for it is not lawful for Dorians to pass in here. Woman, I am not a Dorian, but an Achaean. So, paying no attention to the ominous speech, he made his attempt, and then he was expelled again with the Lacedaemonians. The rest of the men the Athenians put in chains to be killed. Among them was Tymesitheus the Delphian, about whom I could mention very great deeds of strength and courage that he performed. These men then, after being laid in chains, were put to death. After this the Athenians sent for Cleisthenes to return, and also for the 700 families that Cleomenes had driven out. Then they sent envoys to Sardes, wishing to make an alliance with the Persians, for they were quite sure that the Lacedaemonians and Cleomenes had become their bitter enemies. When these envoys reached Sardes and said what they had been ordered to say, Artaphernes, son of Histastes, the governor of Sardes, asked who these men were who requested to be allies of the Persians, and where on earth they lived. After hearing this from the envoys, he summed up his answer to them as follows. If the Athenians were willing to give earth and water to Darius, then he was willing to make an alliance with them, but if not, he ordered them to be gone. The envoys took the matter upon themselves, and said they were willing to do this, because they desired to make the alliance.
And there we leave Athens newly free and newly dangerous, her enemies already gathering Sparta regretting what she has done, and the old tyrant Hippias nursing his grudge. Next time, in part 28, Athens fights off 3 enemies at once, takes up an ancient and bitter feud with Aegina, and a great congress at Sparta hears 1 Corinthians stand up and tell them exactly what tyranny is worth. Mind the footnotes, and beware the folly.